In this edition of Roots and Reflections, we're going to walk on the Via Dolorosa, the way of sorrows taken by Yeshua, Jesus, from judgment to crucifixion in the heart of Jerusalem. There are different ways to get to the Via Dolorosa, but the most direct approach is through the Lion's Gate, also known as St. Stephen's Gate, Jehoshaphat's Gate, the Jericho Gate, or Mary's Gate. So many names make it a bit confusing, so I consulted with Claire Fawn of the University of the Holy Land.
And it's also known as the Lion's Gate. Which gate really is it?
I think the answer to that is yes. We call it St. Stephen's Gate from church tradition, which holds that when Stephen, the first martyr, whose death is recounted in Acts chapter 7 to 8, when he was stoned, he was taken out of that eastern gate and stoned outside the city. But we call it the Lion's Gate because when the gate was newly built by Suleiman the Magnificent, his architects had two engraved stones with lions placed on either side of the gate's entrance. So the two names reflect two different ways of approaching the old city, one based on Christian tradition and the other based on the history of Suleiman the Magnificent.
It was here at the Lion's Gate in June 1967 that Israeli paratroopers came through the gates of this city to reach the Kotel, the Wailing Wall, to reunify Jerusalem.
40 years ago, the Lion's Gate provided the key to the old city of Jerusalem, while today it opens to the Via Dolorosa. Just inside the walls, we don't want to miss the Pool of Bethesda and the Church of St. Anne, traditional site of Miriam's or Mary's birthplace, the home of her parents, Anne and Joachim.
History runs deep in the old city, as we are here at the pools of Bethesda, or in Hebrew we say Beit Chesda, the house of grace. Many people came here believing that the waters would heal them. Now there is in Jerusalem by the Sheep Gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Beit Chesda, having 5 porches, Beit Chesda meaning the house of grace. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down in a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first, after the stirring of the water, was made well of whatever disease he had.
The pools of Bethesda are really a breathtaking site to visit, and they genuinely date to the time of Jesus and before his time, in fact. There's a popular thought that when the water bubbles up, an angel is moving the water, and whoever can get there first would be healed. Well, these pools really were, throughout the Second Temple period, the focus of a healing center, and many healing stories were associated with the pools of Bethesda, which are these sloped pools that were outside the city in the time of Jesus. Today they're inside, but at his day they were outside.
The Pool of Bethesda, or Sheep Pool, was built by the Hasmoneans in the Second Temple period to collect water from nearby channels. The 2 sections of the pool were large, 15 meters deep, and surrounded by porticos. The nearby Church of St. Anne, built by the Crusaders in the 12th century, was turned into a Muslim theological school by Saladin when he conquered Jerusalem. It wasn't until 1878 that the structure was given to the French White Fathers by the Ottoman Turks in appreciation of France's help in the Crimean War.
Inside of St. Anne's Church, in honor of the Mother of Mary, built during the Crusader times, the architecture just creates such an echo within its walls as we worship and pray. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
The simple lines of this church and lack of adornment contribute to the great voice amplification and echo. Even the plainest voice sounds like it could join the heavenly choir in this place. From the Pool of Bethesda, we go back out to St. Stephen's Gate Road on our way to the Via Dolorosa.
When coming to Jerusalem on a hot day like this, wow, you need to drink a lot of water. I'm singing in the sun while walking in the way.
This road runs parallel to the northern side of the Temple Mount. 2,000 years ago, a massive fortress stood here providing a bastion for Roman power in Jerusalem. From its bulwarks, those Romans kept an eye on the hundreds of thousands of Jewish worshippers flocking to the temple during the pilgrimage feasts. From their vantage point, Roman troops didn't hesitate confronting Jewish crowds. As the Gospel of Luke indicates, there were present at that season some who told him, Jesus, about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifice on the Temple Mount.
Roots and Reflections is a program created to bring you the Bible, culture, and education from Israel. It is our desire to build you up in your faith, to bring you hope both now and in the future, and to share God's love with all of you. Call the number on your screen and partner with us as we seek to share the good news from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth. This was the complex of the Antonia Fortress, named after Mark Antony, named so by Herod in honor of him. And it is actually here where the Roman garrison was stationed. And it is thought that Pilate sat in judgment over Jesus the Messiah right in this place. At this place are the first 3 stations of the cross on the Via Dolorosa.
This Franciscan Catholic compound is the site of the first 2 stations of the cross. The first station is the Praetorium, the court where Pontius Pilate condemned Yeshua to death by crucifixion. The second station is the Chapel of the Flagellation, where stained glass windows depict the verse, "So Pilate, wanting to gratify the crowd, released Barabbas to them, and delivered Jesus after he had scourged him to be crucified." The ceiling portrays a crown of thorns. Across the street, from the first and second stations, is a Muslim school, from the courtyard of which one can see the entire Temple Mount. This location was also part of the Antonia Fortress.
At the Antonia Fortress, the Romans were able to keep an eye out on the Temple Mount. Today, we can see why. The Via Dolorosa today is based on history much later, as opposed to it being actually the original foundations during the days of Jesus himself.
Yes, today when we walk through the Old City, we're actually walking on a street level that is much higher than the street level at the time of Jesus in the 1st century. Because of course nearly 2,000 years have transpired, and through many, many periods of occupation this street has been built up. So where in the Old City can you actually see the Jerusalem of Jesus' day? Well, at the Western Wall, at the Southern Temple Mount excavations, and along the Tyropoeon Valley. All of that is truly from the time of Jesus. But when we walk along the Via Dolorosa, we actually have to step inside to various buildings to be able to see remains from the time of Jesus.
The best place to step inside and down to the ancient street level is under the Ecce Homo convent of the Sisters of Zion, where the basement level coincides with the inner courtyard of the Antonia Fortress.
Today, of course, above this courtyard is the Notre Dame Lezion, but it is here that the Romans actually played games, as exhibited in the pavement itself, the inscription of the Roman game board. It is here that the Roman soldiers would have taken Jesus, mocking him, spitting upon him, and laying upon his head a crown of thorns and putting a royal robe. The name Ecce Homo goes back in reference to scripture in John chapter 19, verse 5, which says, "Behold the man." Here at the Ecce Homo convent, the scriptures come alive through the prophet Isaiah in chapter 53, where it says, "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed."
Humanity is lost. And even if humanity is not aware of that fact, humanity is separated from God because of sin. And what Yeshua accomplished was redemption for humanity, for the Jewish people first, because the promises were to Israel, but to the nations. And also what was accomplished for humanity was the assurance that God's kingdom is coming on this earth when Yeshua returns.